Cool. So thanks, Zim, for having me. I was having a chat with Kim on LinkedIn, trying to think of what can I speak on that could be helpful to everyone on the call. And one thing she mentioned was, especially in the Zim kind of environment, designers have a tough time trying to convince the people with budgets and kind of the people running their projects that embarking on a proper kind of user experience um, journey is worth it for their project or for their business. So a lot of the things that we'd love to do usually take some time, and obviously time costs money in business, and this is not always received. So that's what I wanted to talk about. My experience when it comes to trying to speak to stakeholders, get them on board with our processes from a kind of usability point of view, user experience design point of view, and some of the things you can do to try and hopefully win that battle. So a little bit about myself. I study computer science, so that's what my degree is. So I have a technical foundation in computer science, but I've always been a creative. I've always been a designer. So you see that for the 10 years after my software engineering, I did digital design, print design, and a bit of front-end development. But I recently switched to specialize mostly in UI, UX kind of work. And because I spent so much time in design, the 10 years, my specialization is also visual design. So I'm more kind of 70% visual design and experience, and 30% UX. A big part of that was design systems. So I was hired to be Emirates NBD's design system lead, and Emirates NBD is the largest banking group in the Middle East. So I was their design system lead, and I ran projects to implement design systems across their different projects, both for their subsidiaries and their internal facing projects, like the internet or CRM platforms and things like that. Recently, I'm transitioning now into design leadership. So I'll be the head of UX at a bank in Abu Dhabi. So I'm leaving the kind of design world and moving more into design leadership, which is a space that I've always wanted to be in. So I'm thankful that I finally get the chance to do that. So what I'll try to do with this is, because it's a nice small group, stop me if you have any questions. If you have any questions about my journey and how I got there, feel free to ask. I'll try and make this as fluid as possible, because I'd love it to be a discussion at the end, more than me just presenting slides, you know. So I'll go through these 5 things. So what is return on investment, the benefits of UX, how to measure ROI, winning stakeholders over, and then we'll do Q&A. So I'm sure we all know what ROI is. So essentially, it's just a key performance indicator for to evaluate how profitable something is. So whether that's UX, whether it's your marketing efforts, whatever it is, it's just something we can use to measure how effective an activity is on the business's bottom line. But a lot of the times as user experience designers, we need to talk about the benefits that what we do have before we even start looking at the ROI. So what are some of the benefits of a user-centered approach? So one of my favorites is increased speed of development, because this is something that traditional companies understand. So they understand that if I'm getting a website made, the design is just kind of easy, as they would say. Design is easy. What's hard is actually coding the website and bringing it to life. So if you can increase that process, the speed and efficiency of that process from a design-led point of view, then they could start to see the benefits of a user-centered approach. cost effectiveness, and early problem detection. So early problem detection can come in the form of any early kind of usability tests you perform. So whether it's very early on with your sketches, your wireframes, or if you're prototyping in your chosen design kind of software of choice. So you can detect early problems very early on in the process, which then means you're avoiding costly mistakes down the line. Because if something's been built, typically it costs a lot more time and effort, which equals money to make changes. You can better understand your users through research. So I'm very happy that quite a few people on the call actually specialize in UX research. And this is very important to understand our users, and increase chances of getting more customers. And this is something that any business leader will want to do, right? Increase your market share, get more customers, become more profitable. So where it becomes difficult is, how do you measure the effects of usability on a project or a company? So this is typically broken down into two kind of buckets. You have intangible benefits and tangible benefits. And intangible benefits are usually very hard to justify. And those are the things, as creatives, we can resonate a little bit more with, because they're your more kind of qualitative approach kind of metrics. So these are things like better brand recognition, better communication between teams by improving how the teams work, better brand image externally, reduce stress levels. So if your business is meeting its targets, if your business is efficient, people tend to be less stressed within that organization. Things like improved customer experience while they're using your product, etc. So these are like intangible benefits. And tangible benefits of usability design are things like higher customer conversion rates. So these are things that you can actually measure: increased sales, reduced development costs, reduced support queries, increase in market share. The ones that I've seen when at the time where I was working at MSMBD, for example, the bank, they really understood how much money it cost them when it came to dealing with customer support issues. So they have a dedicated call center, as you'd imagine, since they're a large bank. And it costs them a lot of money to put bums on seats in those call centers, to try and resolve the same issue time and time again. And one of the key kind of performance indicators for us as a design team at the bank was actually to reduce the amount of those calls customers were making to the support center, because they wanted to not only reduce costs, but reducing the number of calls meant that their customers were having a better experience. So those two go hand in hand quite a lot. An increase in market share as well is something that you can measure. So your sales based versus your competitor sales, for example, is one way to measure that. And if you see your sales increasing over time based on what you've done as a design team, then you know you're doing something right. So in terms of tangible ways as well, so design systems are something that I've seen them work firsthand at MSMBD, because we had, going into the project, they needed to basically create two apps, one for Islamic banking and one for traditional retail banking. And there are places where those two apps do intersect, but there's some kind of core banking principles that the Islamic app needed to have that the other app didn't. But they all had to share the same code base for efficiency. So how we did that is through design systems, where we build one app, and using design systems, tokens, and kind of scalable ways of working, we can easily transition from that one code base and deploy the other app. And we saved about 70% developer effort by doing that. And when you're a company that has almost 150 developers and you're saving 70% of their time, you can already see how much of a cost saving that is. It's literally in the millions. And I love this example that Drew Luma gave from Project 202, where he's basically saying by eliminating code redundancy, you can save a lot of time in development. And when you scale up your number of developers, it means you're saving millions of dollars a year. So this is obviously it's a much bigger scale than you might typically find in Zim, for example, because you'll be working with much smaller budgets, much smaller teams, but the principle is the same. Every dollar you save counts. So one kind of strategy I've seen that helps when you're trying to make your case as a usability designer is to be proactive. So a lot of the times things won't come to you naturally. So you'll have to kind of fight and make your case. And even at MSMBD, which was a kind of mature organization, we still, as a design team, had to fight. We really didn't get our respect until we were more proactive. We inserted ourselves into their meetings. So the bank periodically had town halls, for example, and we would invite ourselves to the town hall, tell them we've got something to say. We want to show you what the design team's been working on. And we use that platform to actually go through our process, what as a design team, what value we're bringing to the business, and what are the things we could even achieve even more if given the opportunity. And the more we did that, the more the respect we got from all corners of the business, to the point where everyone from the CEO to the CTO, which were, and the CTO, I think, was the one really driving the digital transformation that was going on. He ended up saying that design systems, because of our success story on the one project, needed to be made mandatory for all projects in the bank. So we ended up getting buy-in from a very senior stakeholder simply because we were proactive when it came to presenting our case. And one way of doing that is these UX metrics. So you conduct things like surveys, look at the currently deployed products, whether it's an app or website. So you can look at its analytics, look at where people are dropping off, especially in e-commerce. This is very crucial. If you're trying to convert sales, understanding your website's analytics becomes even more crucial. Using usability testing to measure kind of quantitative things. And like I said before, customer support is a big one. So that's an easy place you can go to figure out exactly where the company is going wrong. So if you have a helpline or a call center or someone that customers can phone to complain about or to complain to, those are the people you need to be friends with, because then that's where you find out exactly where not only the products you're building go wrong, but where the entire experience of the business goes wrong. I was watching a short video by from Nielsen, the group, and they were basically saying the term user experience has been kind of bastardized across the years. So it doesn't mean today what it was meant to mean initially when they coined the phrase user experience. Because if you really think about it, the user experience extends the product the user's holding. The example that he gave was Apple. So users, when you think of user experience from an Apple point of view, it's very easy to think it's the software, it's the device I'm holding. But it extends that. It's the experience of, if you're buying an iMac, how big is the box the iMac comes in? Can you easily carry the iMac from the Apple store to your car? Can you drive that home? Can you set it up easily? If you're If you're a family, how do you set up that computer to cater to each kind of family member? Then you look at the broader Apple ecosystem, where it's not just the iMac now, it syncs to your laptop, your iPad, your Apple Watch, etc. And you start being involved in what they infamously call the Apple ecosystem. And it's an entire experience that creates loyalty. And the reason a lot of Apple users won't, and I'm one of them, I won't deviate from Apple, is because I'm fully invested in that ecosystem, which forms an entire part of the user experience. So these are the things that you find when you speak to customer support. And let's take a Zimbabwean company, for example, GTEL, the guys that make the mobile phones. If you go to their customer support, you might find people could be complaining about the software. They could be complaining about the size of the box, the materials the phones are made of. They could be complaining about the website, its usage, etc. So as a product designer or an experienced designer, it really helps to understand the business, and you can use that knowledge to further kind of make your case when it comes to usability. An example, I wanted to I've just forgotten, but I had an example of this. If I remember, I'll come back to it. So those are UX metrics. An example is a registration form on a website. So typically onboarding is something most designers have kind of designed at some point in their career. And how do you measure if onboarding journey is working well? Some of the things you can do from a metrics point of view is you could measure the success rate of people actually going through and creating their account if it's an onboarding journey. So usability testing can show you where people are dropping off, where people are having problems. You could even look at the website's analytics to see completion rates. So that's another way of kind of getting data on is this platform actually doing what it's meant to do. Average ease of use is a great way you can get more data through surveys. So what are people saying in general about this experience? And again, support, are people actually contacting support and having problems with this journey? So I'm giving this example as a way to illustrate that if you're a designer embedded in a company that has a website and you want to make improvements to a certain aspect of that website, but if you go and you're not armed with data, your stakeholders will just say, we don't have time, or we don't have money, or we're fine for now, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll keep getting pushback. But if you arm yourself with data and you're proactive in getting this data and understanding the business and kind of aligning your UX tasks with the business goals, then it's much easier to get buy-in from even as high as the CEO himself, he or she. You can get buy-in from them very easily if you're aligning your UX goals with the business goals. So I just put together some examples of what some of the things we hear. So we hear things like, and I've heard this a lot from stakeholders, because they feel like, especially people that have founded the companies, they feel like they know what their customers want. And you'll hear things like, we don't need to do user research because we know what our customers want. Just do X, Y, Z and we're good to go. Or we have graphic designers, they can do it, et cetera, et cetera. So these are some of the things we hear. And it's important to arm ourselves and to know how to respond to those things. And I love this kind of bit of text from the Design System Handbook, where that says a lot of businesses are actually investing in design, and I feel like everyone on this call knows that. And good design actually now offers a competitive advantage, and I think there are a lot of real-world examples of this. Apple being probably one of my favorites, obviously. But there are a lot of cases where companies like Miro or Slack and famously Revolut in the financial services industry. So Revolut has an amazing user experience, and that's how they've managed to kind of get the market share they have in such a short time. It's all about great design and being a design-led company. Some examples you could use for stakeholders as well, just to get a conversation going, is things like this. So Mozilla, 70% decrease in support calls, because they actually actively spent time on making usability improvements. Virgin America, increase in not only conversion rates, but they also have fewer support calls. Their booking speeds increased as well. And you can use the analytics I mentioned earlier to actually see stats like booking speeds increasing, because you can see how long is someone spending on a particular journey on the website. And you can actually notice as you're making usability improvements, those stats are fluctuating and changing. Statistics are a very good way that I've seen a lot of good UX people kind of memorize some key stats. And this is one of those kind of key UX statistics you hear a lot, that every dollar invested in UX results in a return of about $100. Very vague, but you can easily take this premise and apply it to your own company and your own situation, because every dollar you spend in UX essentially gives you 100x return. Mobile users, 5 times more likely to abandon the task if the website isn't optimized for mobile. So we know that mobile first is a big thing now, because most people actually browse on their mobile, and that's where our consumers live. So just knowing some of these statistics really helps, especially if, like, for example, that last one, that cites a respected organization like PwC. Things like this will be very useful to know. Like, for example, 90% of users stop using an app if it performs poorly. So these are very good ways of just knowing how to approach your stakeholders with data, especially data. Yeah, and basically backing up what you say with the real world examples. Yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you for that, Batsirai. Great presentation. Yeah. Will you be able to share your slide after this, so that I can share with everyone else who didn't manage to attend today?
Sure, definitely.
Awesome. Okay. Any questions, guys? It's from Batsy with questions.
Mazi, hi. I'm probably gonna ask something that's not like necessarily connected to the presentation, but like I'm more interested on knowing, like, what was your journey like coming from Africa, moving to Dubai?
Yeah.
How did you actually pull that one?
That's a good question. Thanks for asking. I was hoping someone would ask. So truth be told, I've always, going into it, I always felt like being a Black African in a predominantly kind of white industry was going to be tough. So I initially kind of had I basically had mental blocks for myself, right? Because of my own preconceived notions of what it would be like for a Black African going into the I started in South Africa, or rather, let me start at the beginning. So I ran my own design studio in Harare from 2008 to like 2013. And that's the time where I really learned how to kind of work hard, right? Get my hands dirty. I was self-taught in basically everything, because I studied computer science, which was C++ and first year Java. So I didn't have any kind of front end training like HTML, CSS, etc., because it was all C++. And I didn't have any classical design training either. So it was all, during those 5 years, I was self-taught, did a lot of client presentations. Zaira will attest to that because that's how we met. And yeah, and I really learned how to be a great designer because I had to be for my business. So when I moved to South Africa and I was working at a digital agency there, my approach to work was a little different from most people because I was running a business in Zim during hyperinflation days, and we all remember how kind of 2008 was. You really had to graft, right, to make it happen. So my approach to work has always been different. Wherever I work, I treat the company like it's my own company, because I come from that entrepreneurial background. So I find that why I was able to probably be successful when I myself might not have thought I would go as far as I have is probably because of that. That work ethic and being constantly just positive and optimistic. And I'm always asked, like, Batsi, why are you smiling so much? Like, why are you smiling? Because I came from hyperinflation and I know tough situation when I see it. So working at a digital agency in South Africa is a godsend. It's a blessing from God, and I'm grateful every day that I'm doing it. So yeah, so when I then moved to Dubai, I was offered the job while I was still in South Africa, fortunately. My wife and I had always wanted to work abroad, so I was offered a job here, and I quickly took it. Then we moved here. I was a UI UX designer at an agency, and from there moved to Emirates MBD as the design system lead. And I learned a lot. I think I learned the most during that 1 year at Emirates MBD. And the key, I think, to all of that was towards the middle. So it was all about branding yourself, branding myself, upskilling myself, and just making myself known. So if you're not out there participating, creating content, writing articles, doing talks like this, then no one will know you exist. And it's much harder to gain that self-confidence that you totally need if you're kind of closed off and just working on your own thing. So I hope that answers most of your question.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so now on the on the UI UX thing, right? When you're working on your apps, what programs or like what programs do you think are the most successful? Like, because there's so many there's so many coding programs out there. So which one is most successful? And another thing, there's so many of these coding programs online. Like, you can just, purchase one off the shelf. How successful are those? Because like, if you're implementing it into small businesses, are they effective enough, or do you need to go into designing your own one?
So I think you're referring mostly to websites, for example, like those online website builders.
Like building applications for your client to interact with your company.
Okay. I'm see. Let me try and see if I understand your question. So the first one was, I think your question was two parts. The first part was in terms of software, right, that designers use.
Two parts. Yeah, which coding programs are most effective when you're building your apps?
Okay. Yeah. So your question is specifically for apps. Okay. So from what I've noticed, it really depends on your budget. So there are typically two ways you can approach building an app. The first way is going native, which means you're coding in iOS native and Android native. And typically you need developers that are specialized for iOS and developers that are specialized for Android working in parallel. So you can already see that that's like twice the manpower, and typically that's going to be more expensive. That's one way. The other way is to use a platform like Flutter. And I'm working on a project now that uses Flutter. So Flutter is basically, you need one developer that can code in Flutter using Flutter, and you can deploy your app from Flutter to both iOS and Android. So basically, you do the work once, and you deploy on both platforms. There are like intrinsic benefits of going native, which was the more expensive, the first option, because I think the actual experience of the app itself will be much better for obvious reasons if you're building it natively. But for smaller companies, I would recommend going the route of something like Flutter, or React Native is another one. So I would recommend two: React Native and Flutter, if you're going to build one app that will work both for Android and iOS.
Yeah, I have a question.
Cool, thanks.
Sure.
All right, cool. All right, so like I've checked out like your portfolio. I've noticed like there was like 3D, and it was like pretty good 3D modeling and like and rendering. So one thing I've noticed like online, because like I follow a lot of like Adobe Creative Cloud, like those UI and UX presentations. I've noticed that apart from like what you mentioned, where like you need to have like statistical data and usability testing, like data and feedback that you get from the call center to get stakeholders like interested or like buy-in. I've noticed that there's also like when you're now presenting work, like I've noticed like online, at least some of these designers were just doing like interactive prototypes wasn't enough to convince certain stakeholders, where like you now had to do flashy stuff like motion design or using like certain presentations to get certain buy-in. So like I wanted to ask you, like apart from like the data-driven ways of getting stakeholders interested, like how much of like doing fancy presentations, doing stuff that's a bit more exciting actually contributes to actual investor buy-in? Because like I've noticed that like especially if you check job what's it called, they usually say for UI and UX design you need to know how to do motion design, and you need to know
I think that's actually a very good question, and an important one. I think for me, it's not so much the flashiness of your design than it is the story you're telling with your presentation. So what I've noticed is a very underrated, storytelling is a very underrated skill, and one that's not very common, especially among designers, where you're able to take your design, break it up, and present it in a way that's cohesive and makes business sense. So you'll probably get your stakeholders impressed much more if you tell a story than if you just put together slides of like fancy animations to try and impress them that way. Because the problem with the fancy animations is a lot of the times people recognize that to develop that fancy animation and that fancy app costs a lot more and might not in the end have, it might not, what that extra cost might not warrant the investment from a user experience point of view, if you know what I'm trying to say. So adding that much extra functionality from an interaction point of view doesn't necessarily mean your return on investment is higher, because there comes a certain point where that curve flattens out. There's a model called the Kano model, K-A-N-O. And I found this a really good way to approach that discussion. So basically the Kano model looks at delighters and detractors. Delighters being the things that will delight your users, and detractors being the things that users that will frustrate users. And there comes a time where delighters become detractors. So you look up the Kano model. I found it quite insightful. I won't do justice if I try and explain it now. But yeah, it's a very good framework to use when you're trying to see all the fanciness. Is it useful or is it not useful? So I would say, to answer your question, I would say the storytelling is much more impressive, or will get you much further than anything else.
Thanks.
I would like to expand on Tadiwa's question on how you moved from being in Zimbabwe, especially you were around in 2008, and then you transitioned to the other positions in different countries. So I'm going to take this from the perspective of saying, okay, I'm a Zimbabwean. I am looking for opportunities. I have this portfolio, but I'm just not getting responses. What should I do? How do I do it? How do I get offers from Dubai, for example?
Yeah.
What would you suggest?
Sure. So Dubai, when I came here 4 years ago, was a little different. They were hiring people from all over the world and putting up the expense of doing that. So they would fly you, offer you accommodation when you arrive. They would sort out your family visas, all like the whole 9 yards. Now, especially because of COVID, that has basically just more or less disappeared. It's still there for like the really senior positions, but for everyone else, it's let's hire the people that are already here because it's way cheaper. So it's a lot harder now to put together a portfolio while you're in Zim and attract attention from companies in Dubai. It might be easier from what I've seen in the UK, for example. They will hire you based on the strength of your work and your portfolio. Because just generally speaking, within the UK market, I feel like there's not enough talent to cater for their needs. Whereas Dubai, I feel like there is enough local talent that the companies here can kind of hire the people that are here. And by the people that are here, I just mean the people on the ground. So if you're on a visitor's visa in Dubai, for example, then you would be people on the ground because it's cheaper to hire you than someone in Kenya or Nigeria or Amsterdam or somewhere really far, right? So I would say what I've seen is really helps when you're trying to get work abroad is the quality of your portfolio. So don't try and focus on having like 10 portfolio pieces. Literally like one portfolio piece that's really good can land you that job overseas. An example of that was Revolut. I was applying to Revolut in, I think it was 2019, early 2020, UK, because I wanted to move to the UK. And the talent or hiring manager within Revolut simply asked me for one portfolio piece. And they kept asking me to add more detail, to the point where I ended up getting a better job here. So I decided not to move to the UK. But it just showed me the importance of having like one really, really good case study in your portfolio that really shows the depth of thinking. Because like John asked, it's how do you sell yourself? It's not about the fancy animations. Companies really are looking for people that can think. And just like I was saying, if you're trying to win over stakeholders, you need to tell a story. If you're trying to win over an employer, you also need to be able to tell a story. So your portfolio needs to really tell your story from who am I, how do I look at problems and solve them, and all those kind of things as a designer are really important. So yeah, focus on like one really, really good portfolio piece as a minimum, because it's about quality, not quantity. if you can get 3 really good ones, great. But typically people, like if you're hiring, you can imagine you're looking at like 100 people, 50 to 100 people. You don't have time to look at 3 portfolios per person, right? So realistically, hiring managers are probably only looking at 1 portfolio per person. And if you're trying to do like 10 just to show that you've done a lot, then you're not doing yourself a favor.
Nice. All right. Thank you. Thank you. And there's one. The options that you gave. So here are on the options when developing apps. You gave the native app option and then the Flutter option, and then there's also React Native. What about PWAs? Is that something that's being implemented? I don't know, from your experience, because I understand
I didn't get that.
benefits out. Hello? Yeah, I'm saying, what about PWAs, progressive web apps?
Okay.
Yeah, I understand their benefits outweigh those of native apps. So from your experience, are they being implemented? And from a UX perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm actually not very familiar with progressive web apps because I haven't seen them being used, especially here in Dubai. No, I haven't. Yeah, I've never seen them being used.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay.
You know, I think these PWAs are very limited in their offering. So it's very hard to adapt it to what you need. That's why a lot of companies don't go. So I think if you're doing it for like maybe a Zoom company, it might work because it's quick and easy. There are a few like very small independent companies I know that are using that. And it's like, you know, just it's very, very easy to just get going, but it's very limited also in its in its use. So yeah, so I think if you like at Batsi's level, you're not going to even know about it.
Yeah, I haven't even seen them being used.
No, that's great. Thank you.
I think you make a good point, Zaira, because there is a business and use case for progressive web apps, especially in the Zim context.
Right.
It cuts out a lot of the coding and you know, stress levels because but then also you've got the challenge now of paying for it internationally because you're going to have to buy it off your website. Like, I mean, you're going to have to pay for it. Like, so I don't know. It just depends on which companies are happy to use that. But I know, like, you know, a lot of the companies in Zim, they want to pay in Zim dollars. So that kind of limits you to like almost nothing. So then in that case, it's better just to create your own thing, and then, you know, if you've got the knowledge and the ability to do it in Zim.
Great, thank you. Kim, you have your hand raised. Please go on.
You're on mute, Kim.
Yeah, cool. With you being self-taught, did you kind of ever have like imposter syndrome when you're like applying for jobs? And like, how did you deal with that?
I still do, my friend. I still do. I don't think imposter syndrome is something you ever get rid of. Eh?
Okay.
I definitely did, but I think what helped was the fact that I was willing to do the work and learn.
Okay.
So whenever I, example, the most recent time I can remember was Emirates MBD, because I was landing in a position where all the software they were using I'd never used, and they were quite a mature design team because they'd been going for almost 2 years before I joined, and their design system was mature but just needed like an extra kick. And these are basically all things I'd never done. So I just took like the first 2 weeks and just dug in and learned as much as I could, and came out of that, yeah, as the design system lead. So
Awesome.
something that you can definitely overcome if you just put in the work.
Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, it's still today. I mean, imposter syndrome.
Yeah. No, awesome.
Yeah. Great. Okay. It's almost time up. We have a minute to go. Is there anyone else who still has a question for Batsy?
I've got something else.
Hi, Batsy. Oh, no,
go.
it's fine.
No, go Teddy. Go Teddy.
Okay. Batsy, I wanted to ask something though. Like, I heard you said you started like doing, is it UI and UX at agency, and then you shifted to another company. Like, where would you say you probably had the best experience? Where could you actually do the UI and UX, or just UI with, what could I say? With enough time with people that actually kind of like appreciate it?
It's definitely working in-house at a company, because the problem with agents is they're bound by their clients' budgets, which are very, very low.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, agencies, you never do your best work at agencies, because they're always like, no budget, no time, just get something out, that type of thing. Whereas when you're working at a bank, like I was, they've got budget for days, right? And they've got like a 5-year, 10-year plan of how they're going to execute. Their profits are in the billions of US dollars, like net profits are in the billions. So they've got the time, they've got the money to do it properly. So you always find your best work is usually done in that kind of environment.
Thanks.
Sure. You were going to say?
Can I squeeze in my question?
Yeah, sure.
So there was something you mentioned, Batsy. You're kind of talking about how like you get friendly with customer support and they bring you like a lot of the problems, and you're kind of just listening to the customers and hearing a lot of their problems. But then how do you decide which of those are most important to work on? I think you said align the UX goals with business goals. I don't know, can you like expand what that kind of means, or like give an example?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good question. So a lot of the times it's not up to the designer to decide what they're going to do. So in the case of, if I were to give an example, in the case of the bank where I was working, it definitely wasn't up to the designer to pick what they're going to do. And their approach when they started off the transformation project was actually to use that data from the call centers as a reference to understand their pain points. So they had already kind of done that and partnered with that, because for them, they actually acquired a company. It was a totally separate company that did customer support, but they were on the same premises. So you're talking a company that has over 200 people on its own. And that was its own business unit. So they partnered with them to continuously get insights and data to what were people's actual pain points. And then they worked at addressing those. An example for the bank was credit cards. So credit card fraud is something very scary for anyone, and typically a very large percentage of call center calls where something's wrong with my card, I want to block it. So if we can make blocking your card super, super easy within the app, that's like 50% of the calls that are not going to the call center, just by one foul swoop, right? So that's one example of, but I think if outside that context, if you're being proactive and approaching call centers, then the first thing you need to do is, as a product designer, understand what goals your company has for your products. And these were some of those KPIs we mentioned. So what does the business want to achieve? Is it we want to sell more phones? Is it we want to have more people register for our newsletter? Is it we want more market share? Like your CEO will typically know exactly what he wants to achieve for his business in a given time. If you know that, like 1, 2, 3, we want to do this as a business, and then you go to the call center and ask them what problems users are having, then you can easily correlate between the two proactively and say, so I've spoken to the call center. If you as the marketing team want to achieve X, Y, Z, these are the things you need to address because this is where our customers have pain points. And they might not start off approaching the call center and actually getting this information. So yeah, that's one way you can do it.
That's awesome. Cool.
Batsy, how effective is social media in terms of getting customer feedback?
It's very effective, because people are usually very, I mean, there are a lot of trolls, but those are the exception to the rule. A lot of the times people voice their opinions on Twitter, and it's a
even
very
in
good,
banking.
Oh, especially in banking. Like, oof.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
they were told like heavily, and yeah, it's very bad actually.
Oh, okay.
Like when you're dealing with people's money,
yeah.
when you're dealing with people's money, people get very heated.
Is it? Okay. And now, how do you translate the data from your social media? Like, what's the best way to do you think the analytics on your social media platforms are effective enough to make your decisions, or are you using other programs to translate your social media data, to be more effective?
Right. So I saw the social media aspect. I saw it more when I was in South Africa because I was working at an agency that was a digital agency, and they had an entire kind of social media community management, data analytics side of things. And they were the ones gathering the data and what people were saying. It was very key. As part of our reporting, it was very key to understand what people were saying at any given point. So I can't really say with certainty because I wasn't working in the social media teams, but I definitely know that brands take social media very seriously now, because that's the one way users actually voice their opinions is ranting on social media.
Awesome.
I have another question. All right.
Yes.
So, okay. So I noticed that you mentioned that like when you're doing agency work, because, most of the work is limited to the client's budget, you don't have like a budget for, I guess, maybe doing usability testing and maybe doing more extensive user research and stuff like that. But apart from maybe the agency environment, in terms of like, I guess company cultures, or maybe working in Zim or SA or like where you are currently, what would you say? Like, would you say like the appreciation of design differs based where you are, or it's like a company culture thing? Because like I'll give like an example. It's like a small issue I had like at work, where like okay, so we worked on Nedbank's like banking app. Like we made like adjustments and changed it so that it would match the brand manual, at least the design system. So I know like on Apple was very strict. So generally like whatever updates you made, you need to make sure like on the App Store, everything looks the same. But we didn't update like the feature graphics on the Google Play Store. So basically when people go on Nedbank to download it, right, it looks like the previous app, even though we already updated it because Nedbank was like, wanted to be. So I was like, hey guys, let's update this. But it's like, I don't know, they didn't think it was important. Maybe it doesn't really affect, but I was just wondering, like, it'll be weird. You download an app, but it looks different once you install it. So I don't know, I just like about that, maybe instead, like, maybe some people don't take it seriously. Maybe it's a Zen thing, or I don't know, maybe it's a company culture thing. Like, what have you noticed?
So who wasn't taking it seriously? Was it Nedbank or was Nedbank your client?
Okay, Nedbank was the client, But I think okay, I think there was no pressure on Nedbank's part because okay, thing Omi is because the stakeholders were using the iOS version because on iOS it looks exactly like the current app because we had to update it because they wanted to look like with the brand menu, but on the Play Store it looks like the old stuff and the feature graphics weren't updated. So I was like,
Okay.
doesn't make sense to make update.
Yeah, I think it's a company culture thing. Because it's if your line managers have attention to detail, then things like that won't be acceptable. So yeah, I think to answer your question, I would say it's definitely a company culture thing.
Just one question. Do you think maybe it was purposely done because it is a very visual thing, and like if the bulk of Zimbabweans are going to go onto the Google Play Store and they're not going to recognize the new app. Do you think they're probably just waiting a while, or is it okay? Am I just overthinking this? So like maybe they're just waiting, because like they don't want to lose their customer base. Like it's easier to recognize the old stuff because at least they feel, ingrained with it, or
people don't like change.
Yeah.
Was
this in Zim or SA, John? Because you said Nedbank, right?
It was in Zim.
Is it
I noticed that as well. I saw it also, and I was looking, and I'm trying to figure out why are they changing the script, right? But anyway.
John, I think that question was directed at you.
Oh, okay. I guess. As in like you're trying to understand like why they didn't change it or didn't change the feature graphics to match like the actual app. Is that the question?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe they just not changing it because they don't people recognize it and they don't want to lose that.
To be honest, I don't think there was much output into it. I think it was just extra work. So
okay.
The thing is like at where we work, the devs are handling multiple tasks, so it seemed like extra work. Like, oh, now we need to update the feature graphics. Nah, let's work on this. This is a priority. I think that's honestly what was going on.
But I think
even Nedbank, because I didn't hear anything from the Nedbank guys. Because I know, like for the most part, like most of the stakeholders they use Apple devices. So when you're testing, they're looking at the iOS version.
Yeah, but I feel like in that kind of situation, as the designer, it's up to you to push that narrative to say we need to push consistency. I mean, you can't neglect your Android users when like probably 80% of your customers are on Android. So it's again goes back to that that whole data, arming yourself with data. We all know in Africa, 80% to 90% of people are on Android devices. So to neglect it and focus on iOS because iOS is cooler, I would say is folly. So as the designer, yeah.
Okay, sorry, go. But like I remember Patsy would do this. You sometimes don't wait for your superior to tell you something. You present to them. Yeah. And that makes the difference. That's what gives you the edge,
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Yeah.
Absolutely. Be proactive. Yeah, definitely.
All right.
So I guess basically what I should, so basically what I should do is just have the feature graphics ready for them and just say, hey, if you want to make the update, the graphics exist. Now it's up to you.
Yeah, you need to be.
That's the way, John. That's the way. Okay.
Yeah. You need to champion excellence.
Okay, right, guys. We have to round up. We've exceeded by 13 minutes, but great discussion and great piece raised there. Oh, okay. Hi, Titch. I see you just joined us.
Someone just joined.
Sorry, man, I was in a meeting. I was hoping to have joined you guys earlier. I just got home now. Yeah.
Okay. We'll take your question last since you just joined.
Right.
Did you,
Yeah.
right. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Right.
Okay, go ahead.
My thing is from this end, because of the workflow thing. So I work with a full team. I'm usually just business analysts and those guys getting requirements and stuff from clients. I'm focusing on the UX part and etc. So there's not much in terms of UX research from my side anymore. So essentially my portfolio is largely in designing and creating products and you know, what you call it, prototypes and stuff. So there is some research, but I generally I have general personas that I work with. And from those general personas, yeah, so they're based on our typical client bases and etc.
Yeah.
But like there isn't much going on in terms of research. Now I'm trying to enhance my portfolio, at least some that I put out there. And most portfolios are very extensive, especially in UX in terms of the research area. In terms of that segment, whereas my stuff has mostly been in terms of putting together solutions.
Yeah.
So like, how am I navigating that one? Getting out of that one. Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the things you enjoy doing, just like on the side?
I'm in the creative space. I'm a commercial photographer. I do video. I do creative stuff, a whole bunch of creative stuff, even making music, just playing with some friends, that sort of stuff.
Okay, cool. That's great. The reason I ask is my entire portfolio is made up of personal projects. For the exact reason you just said, the stuff we work on at work isn't always what we want it to be from a portfolio standpoint. So everything in my portfolio has been like for my entire career, however many years it is, everything on my portfolio is personal projects. Because with personal projects, you can work on it slowly and properly. You can choose a project that you enjoy doing, and the output usually is like 10 times better than anything you could do at work. So my advice to you would be pick if it is product design you want to have in your portfolio, obviously, create a product for whatever it is so whether it's music or photography or whatever it's going to be, create a product for that, which means you have to do the research, you have to create a business case for the app. So it then creates a true picture of how you are as a product designer from start to finish, because you're designing not only a product, but you're also kind of nurturing the business case for that product. So you can easily, it's much easier to tell the story if you're controlling that narrative. So yeah, work on a personal project. Don't rely only on the stuff you're doing at work or your portfolio.
All right, now that makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I'll try and make that happen now with these schedules and stuff. But yeah, thanks, man.
Sure.
Right. I think we're good now. Oh, Fati has a question. All right, the questions are coming in. Okay, go ahead, Fati.
Sorry.
I know we're more than like 15 minutes over. Sorry about that. But you mentioned about personal projects. That one is something that I was thinking about a lot. And I was under the assumption that most companies or clients would rather have you present them with like previous client work as opposed to personal projects. So how do you go about presenting those personal projects at the same value that they would expect from like previous client work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it depends on the company. Some companies don't want to see personal projects because they want to see an actual project that's live. I'm fortunate in that the personal projects I was working on was an actual business we're trying to launch. So we actually built the platform. So it was an actual live platform that they could play with. But you're absolutely right. Some companies will want to see not necessarily client work, but just something that's in the marketplace and being used by customers. So yeah, it's a balance. You're right. You can't just have, in some cases, you can't just have personal projects. It's worked for me so far, but certainly, definitely, you might need to show some actual client work as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Before I try and the meeting, is there anyone else? Okay, I think we're good now. We're good. All right. Batsy, thank you so much for making time to be with us today, and for everyone who attended, thank you for making time tonight. I think this ends our meeting, guys. This ends our meeting for all.
Just a last thing from me, because I think a lot of people on the calls were asking about or are probably looking at getting work outside. LinkedIn is your best friend. So a lot of recruiters and companies around the world use LinkedIn primarily as a place to recruit people. So work on your LinkedIn profile, and most importantly, reach out to recruiters. So if, for example, if you want to work in the UK, on LinkedIn, you can set your location as the UK and then look for recruiters or talent or HR or any of those kind of keywords. Find those people, connect with them, ask them what they're looking for. You can go on LinkedIn Jobs, look at the jobs being posted, look for jobs that have been posted by an actual person, not a company. Connect with that person, start talking to them. Because we're fortunate that we're working in an industry that's hot right now, and a lot of companies around the world are hiring designers from around the world. So don't feel like because you're from Zim, you have nothing to offer. People are hiring from everywhere. Just make yourself, like, put yourself out there, connect with people, especially LinkedIn. Have a website with your portfolio, whether it's Behance or your own website, whatever. Make sure that's tip top before you start reaching out to people, because that's what they say, send me your CV or send me your portfolio, those two things. Yeah, so good luck to everyone. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Great. You're welcome. All right, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Kim, another thing, you know what? I'm actually here in Australia, right? And what I'm doing is, like, a lot of my work that I'm doing, I'm reverting back to Zim, to my Zim designers, because I just find them easier to work with. And they understand me better. Yeah. So that's another thing you can look at, just find someone to connect with outside Zimbabwe. And it's working for me. And I am looking to connect with more people. So if anyone's interested, I'm happy to, try and assist. And then it kind of like gives you guys also a basis to work with, and at least you've got an international portfolio. And then to move outside your comfort zone is a lot easier, especially for Zimbabwe. So look, I'm happy to help in any way I can. So do give me a shout, and if I can connect you with somebody, I can do that as well. So that's cool.
Amazing.
Thank you, Zahira. Thank you. We'll definitely be in touch. All right.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, that sums it up. Thank you, everyone. And
by the way,